Misrepresenting the land of opportunity, the inaccuracy of the current poverty measure.
So what is poverty? Poverty is a deprivation of capabilities resulting from inadequate financial means. There are three parts to the story: income, capabilities, and basic needs. We're focusing on this part of the circles.
So what are capabilities? Amartya Sen, famous Indian economist and philosopher, defines capabilities as a person's ability to do valuable acts or reach valuable states of being. Essentially, capabilities are a person's ability to do something or to be something. Take this example. If a person has food in their pantry, they have the capability to eat. A functioning is anything that you can actually complete or do. For example, since the person has access to the food, they have the ability to eat the food. However, they also have the ability to choose not to eat the food. This choice is what gives the person capability. Eating the food turns the capability into a functioning, which changes the possibility into reality. Within capabilities, there are subsets as well. These are internal and combined capabilities as well as central capabilities. Internal capabilities can be thought of as the skills that one possesses, such as speaking. Combined capabilities are a combination of internal capabilities and the external environment, such as the political, social, and economic environment around you. If you have combined capabilities, you possess internal capabilities and have the appropriate external environment. Let's look at some examples. If you have the skills to play and teach others tennis and you are allowed to run an after-school program, you have that combined capability. However, if you have the skills to play tennis but your parents don't allow you to teach kids, you lack that combined capability even though you possess the internal capability of teaching the kids. Let's look at central capabilities, which were defined by Martha Nussbaum. Nussbaum proposes a list of 10 central capabilities which she believes are necessary to live a dignified life. The baseline threshold of what a life worthy of human dignity requires is set by Nussbaum with this list of 10 capabilities. Nussbaum believes that every person has dignity, it is just a matter of whether or not they are treated with it.
So how do we currently measure poverty? America uses what we know as the official poverty measure, or the OPM. It was developed in the 1960s, and it strives to measure resources and thresholds to address poverty. It takes into account families' gross annual pre-tax income. The threshold is set by using the thrifty food basket. The thrifty food basket is supposed to account for food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. When the OPM was created, it was estimated that families spend 1/3 of their total income on food, so that 1/3 was multiplied by 3 to account for the total cost of what was needed for a family to have adequate FCSUs. This was termed the thrifty food basket. The OPM is adjusted for family composition and inflation. However, there are many problems with this measurement. For starters, it doesn't take into account geographical differences. For example, it is more expensive to live in New York than in a rural suburb. Food will be more expensive, rent will be more expensive, and transportation will be more expensive. It neglects cohabiting couples. It just takes into account family relations. It is outdated. Nowadays, food is closer to 1/6 and 1/3 of income spending, and it does not add discretionary expenses. Non-discretionary expenses are childcare, transportation, and out-of-pocket medical expenses. And you don't know where people fall in relation to the poverty line. Some people may be lacking dollars, but some people may be lacking thousands of dollars. It also doesn't add benefits. The OPM generally undercuts poverty measures in comparison to the SPM. There is an exception for people under the age of 18. This is probably due to non-cash or SNAP benefits. In 2018, 11.8% of Americans were living in poverty, according to the OPM. There is another way to measure poverty, though.
The supplemental poverty measure, while it's currently measured, is not used to report the current poverty levels in the United States. The SPM takes into account in-kind benefits, non-discretionary expenses, and geographic region. In-kind benefits are assistance given to families in need for the specific area that they struggle to pay for. Some examples of in-kind benefits are SNAP and Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program. The SPM also accounts for non-discretionary costs such as taxes, child care services, out-of-pocket medical expenses, and work-related expenses such as transportation. It also takes into account geographic differences. To put this simply, the in-kind benefits are added, while the non-discretionary costs are subtracted from a household's total income, not just cash pre-tax income. This creates a more accurate representation of the income poverty. The SPM is currently measured by finding the 33rd percentile of what the average American spends each year on food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. This number is then multiplied by 1.2 in order to account for other costs, which produces the threshold in which a family is considered impoverished or not. This threshold is a better judgment of who is actually experiencing poverty because it looks at more than just income. Because the SPM gives a more holistic view of how a person's income is able to be used to pay for basic needs, we will continue to use this measurement when measuring poverty. We think it is vital to look at more than just income because other economic factors play a role in how families are able to spend their money and the things they must give up due to financial struggles. We know that there is more to poverty than just money. An individual who lives alone and is making $15,000 would look like he is above the poverty line. However, if he lacks the capability to live a fully functioning life with that income, say he has diabetes and has to pay a lot for insulin, then he could be just as poor as someone who has an income of $11,000 but doesn't lack any important capabilities. If someone lacks capabilities, it will affect their financial situation and therefore their quality of life, so this needs to be accounted for when measuring poverty as well. While measuring capabilities seems impractical, all of the data to measure these are already collected, and is done so on a community basis, not individually. This data includes statistics like graduation rates, survival rates, disease rates, and so on. So because both income and capabilities are important to measure poverty, we will use both the SPM and the capabilities approach. We will use the 33rd percentile times 1.2 to find the financial threshold for poverty, and those who fall below that line are automatically considered impoverished. Then we will look at the individuals and families who fall between the 33rd and 40th percentile and look at their combined and central capabilities. We believe that people in this section are often overlooked because when looking solely at financials, as the OPM does, they do not appear to be in poverty. But these are the individuals that even with a few unexpected costs due to the lack of capabilities will find themselves in similar situations to those who are under the threshold. We will use the data that is already collected for this group of people, and if someone is under the 50th percentile for any of the categories such as graduation rates, survival rates, or disease rates, we will classify them as lacking a necessary capability because nobody should have a less than 50% chance of turning capabilities into functionings. Here is an example. If a child lives in a household that makes $26,000 and is above the poverty line, but lives in an area with an average high school graduation rate of 25%, then this child would be classified as lacking a vital capability that would lead to a future with even more limited capabilities. In this case, we would want to allocate education resources to this community to prevent children from being deprived of opportunities to develop capabilities for their future. By looking at both the SPM measurement and the 50% capabilities measurement, we are able to gather more information about a family's condition. We know that poverty is a very complex issue that can stem from multiple different situations. Both income inadequacy and a lack of capabilities creates many issues that put people in poverty, so it is vital to look at both, and everything that could affect both. The SPM is a much more holistic measurement of income than the OPM, giving a more accurate representation of the family's financial ability. However, even with a more accurate income measurement, the arbitrary threshold that is created might still not include everyone who is experiencing poverty. Looking at individuals and families who are close to the line, but who are technically not in poverty by the SPM measure, allows to take into account a capabilities deficit that could put someone in a situation as bad or worse off than someone who is actually under the poverty line.
So why does all of this matter? It matters because people matter. We want to ensure that there is an accurate measure in place to determine someone's lack of capabilities and inadequate income. We want to ensure that someone who lacks those capabilities has the ability to pursue them, although we are not trying to force people to pursue capabilities that they have available to them. Narrowing our scope on the definition of poverty creates the ability to craft more precise responses to alleviate it. If our scope is too broad, we may create solutions that do not completely solve the issue because they are too broad or ineffective. Let's look at some other ways to view poverty. For example, one may argue that a lack of basic needs and resources defines poverty. We view this scenario as a problem, but not a problem of poverty. Another argument could be that someone is poor if they have capabilities but insufficient income. Capabilities and income tend to have a relation between them. More income can result in increased capabilities and vice versa. In this case, someone who has many capabilities likely has the ability to obtain more income. For example, someone who chooses to live in a monastery as a monk is not deprived of their capabilities. They do have inadequate income, especially according to our current measure, but they have chosen this lifestyle, therefore they are not poor. Another argument could be that someone is poor if they have sufficient income but lack capabilities. For example, in a society where women are oppressed by the government, it would result in a lack of capabilities for every woman. Even if one of those women lived in a wealthy family, she would still lack any capabilities. This is an issue that needs approached separately, and by being approached separately, this issue can be more directly targeted and solved more effectively. We also have another argument brought up by Robert Rector. Robert Rector, the Heritage Foundation's Senior Research Fellow, published an article that brings to light an important issue about our current poverty measure. In this article, it is stated that there is a large misconception about what the conditions that impoverished families face. Rector argues that the common person thinks of homelessness and food insecurity when they think of someone who is poor. Rector's article shows the amenities that are possessed by those who are considered poor under the OPM, and he argues that welfare spending should be cut and only allocated to the small amount of people in the groups who face homelessness and food insecurity, not anyone that has these common amenities. What this argument lacks is context. Looking at the amenities that a household has does not show the full situation that a family faces. It is a possibility that a family could own a fridge, stove, and microwave but not be able to afford to keep them on, or let alone afford to fill their fridge with food. A vast majority of these amenities, like a fridge and stove, might not even be owned by these families. For instance, if a family rents an apartment, a fridge, stove, and microwave are usually already there for them when they move in. These low-income families could also acquire these items through assistance programs like church charity drives. This view also assumes that people who are in poverty have always been in poverty, and it excludes those who are just going through a difficult time.
So a quick recap. Poverty is the deprivation of capabilities resulting from inadequate financial means. It should be measured by a combination of the SPM and the 50% capabilities measurement to ensure that a lack of capabilities is not overlooked just because someone is barely above the income threshold.